Okay, this is I actually hate to do this. I really like history buffs. I really like the channel. Um, it's done by a guy named Nick Hodges. Some of the movie reviews are fantastic. I mentioned the one thing about Vietnam that was incorrect, and we were soldiers. But this one is the one that shocked me to my core. Agora. Hypatia was a very special woman in a world dominated by men, who she was considered um, equal to her peers. Actually, let's listen to Nick Hodges.
Hypatia was born in Alexandria towards the end of the 4th century. When exactly, we do not know. Some historians believe there may have been at 355, whilst others argue it was around 370. In fact, most of our knowledge of her comes from the bits and pieces gathered together by historians. What we do know about her is that she was the only daughter of Theon, a Greek scholar and a mathematician, and was generally considered to be one of the most educated men in the city. They had an extremely close bond with one another, and she got from him the same love of learning. From a very early age, Hypatia became fascinated with the subjects her father taught, and she in turn became his star pupil. They would spend countless hours discussing the mysteries of the universe.
Now, the only sources I know of Hypatia, because I actually did a video, you guys know, on my channel, like in '09, about did Hypatia exist? Okay, because we have, who do we have? We have Socrates Scholasticus, who's around the time of Hypatia, who didn't say anything like that, just said daughter of Therion. And we have John of Nike, who's one of the first. He's one of the first witnesses to the Saracen raids and the rise of Islam, who's writing hundreds of years later. And he calls her like a witch, and she was beguiling the. Blah. I mean, no. Um, Everything he wrote is just hype about Hypatia. During his own life, maybe the stuff he writes, we can depend on, but about her, I mean, he wasn't even no, just no. Hundreds of years later, um, and then I guess one of the bishops of Cyrene wrote to her, who was one of her students, um, talking to her about perfecting the astrolabe. But Hypatia is used as a weapon to beat on Christianity, especially Blessed Saint Cyril. But let's go on. Hold on.
And debate of the possible.
This is not just a slander against Arab Christians, even though the horrible butchery of the Copts, the Syriacs, the Melkites, the Maronites, the Syriacs, the Antiochians, the Assyrian Church of the East, the Chaldeans, but and comparing one of the greatest Arab saints to ISIS, who are slaughtering our people right now.
Theon wisely recognized this great passion of hers and encouraged it, especially when she began to surpass him in her studies of astronomy, astrology, mathematics, and philosophy. Eventually, it came to a point when Theon instructed Hypatia that she should also teach, which she did exceptionally well.
Where are you getting this from? But let's get to the real.
She was loved by many of her students, and people came from all across the empire. These sort of questions would soon be under threat. The recently banned religion Christianity had not only been made legal for the first time in its history, but had now been adopted by the Roman emperors. The political landscape throughout the empire was beginning to shift, and religious tensions combined with age-old grudges were boiling over, and Alexandria was no exception. You have the dwindling pagans who were still powerful by this point, but they were beginning to feel their influence slipping away. And then there were the ever-growing Christian population who were resentful for the centuries of persecutions they suffered from their former masters.
If my gods eat and drink and fornicate, good for them. Know this! You who console yourselves with pagan images, men, women, bears, reptiles. Yes.
Statues of their gods were being mocked and desecrated by a mob of Christians, seeking retribution.
Okay. Scholasticis, or Socrates Scholastus, actually talks about Hypatia as virtuous, as if she's a Christian, as a model woman. I mean, we have more historical evidence for Jesus Christ, John the Baptist, Simon Peter, John the Evangelist, and Hypatia. But screw it. Let's take the word of the minimal sources that we have, which is John of Nicaea and Socrates Scholasticus. But, yeah. I mean, I was going to go into, Ptolemy, successor of great Alexander the Great, but Antiochus Epiphanes was a fucking psychopath, and, well, Scholasticus, okay, this is what really gets me about the Jews, because
The pagans armed themselves and attacked.
What madness is this?
That the pagans who were responsible for the
that happened later.
allow or authorize the destruction was officially abolished. And
Hold on. He talks about the abolish the Serapion. Historians are divided. We don't know. Some blame the Roman army. Some blame a Christian mob. But no, it definitely was the Christians. We don't know. Some blame the pagans. That say, yeah, they said, oh, you guys are going to take this over after this. We're getting rid of it.
Christianity had become the new dominant power. Now, the movie jumps forward in time, but doesn't say. In spite of all of this, Hypatia continued to teach and was of religious fun. Used to be one of her students. However, I have been unable to find any evidence of this, and it seems to me that their relationship was more likely politically driven.
This is what
Orestes wished to use her influence to garner support for his administration, and he definitely needed all the help he could get, as there was a new wave of religious fundamentalism sweeping the city. This was from a powerful order of monks called the Parabolani, who were led by the new bishop of Alexandria called Cyril. In his new position, Cyril saw temporal as well as spiritual power amongst his Christian followers.
Parabolani lived in the
Basically,
mountains.
he was the real-world equivalent of the High Sparrow from Game of Thrones.
I don't know what that
The one
means.
thing blocking his path to total power was Orestes, who had the support of the city elite, like Hypatia, and the Jews. And during all of this were frequent and violent confrontations between the Parabolani and the Jews.
Shows them stoning the Jews. Shows them, look at this. Just remember this. Hold on.
Just a bunch of good-for-nothing thugs! Pack animals!
Joran, my dear friend, calm down.
Aye.
Let Bishop Cyril speak in his own defense.
Prefect, our blessed Parabolani, whom he has just called beasts of burden, devote themselves, true enough, to carrying burdens. Crippled, the sick, the
And
lepers.
stones. Prefect, they carry stones. And now they burst into the theater. And they stone us, knowing we will do nothing to defend ourselves because it is the Sabbath.
That is the exact fucking opposite of what happened, what Scholasticus describes. Scholasticus describes the Jews continually attacking the Christians. Christians are divided up into three groups, by the way. You have what would be called the Orthodox or the Catholic. You have the Novatians, who are like the Donatists. They were the ones that I have plenty of videos on the Donatists and Novatians, the Lapsi and the Tridori. They're the ones that, if you were tortured by the Roman pagans and you burnt incense, you could never repent. You were gone. So they thought they were the pure church. And then you had the Arians still. So you had three groups of Christians. Scholasticus writes, the Jews were being hostile to the Christians. At one point in the theater, torturing a Christian in front of all the Jews for their pleasure. Cyril told them to desist, to knock this off. The Jews became even more vicious. They started murdering Christians. They actually, he even says it. Oh yeah, they said that the church was on fire, and then they would stab them in the night. Jews were doing that. Jews were complicit with the Romans, help killing the Christians. So he said, get out of the city. Orestes was hostile to Cyril. Cyril tried to make amends with them through mediation, and then he appealed to the gospel and their common Christian faith. Now, rumors went around that it was Hypatia that was keeping them from reconciliation. So a guy named Peter and a group of some guys killed her with tiles, stripped her naked in a church, and dismembered her. But also, okay, what else does Scholasticus write? Her murder was condemned by the Christians, condemned by the entire Christian community, and all the 5 C's: Church of Rome, Antioch, Constantinople, Jerusalem, and Alexandria, and was condemned by Cyril. The Jews kept murdering Christians and even pretended to be baptized. They would go in and be baptized on dishonest pretenses and then commit crimes. What Christian, and I practice the same faith as they did back then. We have the same liturgy. I confess to a Coptic priest. Our churches aren't church. We are the church. The place, our parish, is a temple. A naked woman being dismembered and then burned. We can't burn bodies for one. Cremation is you're almost anathematized. You'd immediately be executed for that. Stripping a woman naked in a church, in the house of God. This kind of sounds more like the Jews that were, torturing the Christians and knifing them in the streets. I'm not saying the Jews back then are the same as the Jews today. But you quoted Tertullian. Do you know when Tertullian lived? Tertullian's the 2nd century. He's the first of the Latin-speaking church fathers. And he was a heretic. He became a Montanist. So he's the spokesman for all the church, a guy who committed apostasy, Tertullian, the Montanist. Not, Clement of Alexandria or Origen. Yeah, Clement of Alexandria, he was really backwards, So you use a quote by him. You don't mention the Novatians or the Arians. Christians caused the fucking Dark Ages. No, they didn't. They preserved the writings of the Greeks and the Romans from the barbarians. The Britons, they got wiped out by a group called the Angles, the Saxons, and the Jutes. The Anglo-Saxons just slaughtered the shit out of these people. And where a place like Ireland that converted peacefully got all the knowledge of Rome and Greece. So they could build roads, they could build architecture, and this was a big win. And the people of Northern Ireland, known as the Scots, the Picts saw, hey, when we adopt this religion, human sacrifice ends, all this, horrible shit ends, and we get all this stuff like geometry. We have a writing system, we can get mathematics and, have a written history and all this kind of stuff. And they slowly started converting, and they Scottishized themselves. So now you have Scotland. So Ireland gave Scotland its culture and its name. And then there was a competition between the Latin Church and the Gaelic Church for which would convert the Anglo-Saxons. But the Saxons were called the Saxons because they used the Sax. The Germanic barbarians that used the Franciscus that fucking just ran shit like through Gaul. That was for the Franks. You had the Lombards come down through Italy. You had the Vandals and the Visigoths, although some of them were Arians by the time that they came, Arian Christians. And then even after the continent had become Christian again, the Vikings came through. Christianity did not cause the Dark Ages. There was a fanatical faith that rose up just after, around the time of John and Naiku. And you had psychotic barbarians from the north coming down, pagans targeting Christians, killing Christians, targeting monasteries continually. When that finally stopped, you had it again with the Vikings. And then you had Islam sweep across, and Islam annihilated the Persian Empire and annihilated whole cities. Carthage gone. Alexandria gone. Oh, but let's blame the Christians. And compare Middle Eastern Christians to fucking ISIS. And all this witchcraft shit comes from John of Naiku. This is serious history. I mean, it boils my blood because the thing is, I mean, I love history buffs. But this review's biased. It's biased as all get out. I don't think Nick Hodges sees it. I don't think he's trying to be malicious. But I think he's just blind. Like, what sources are you using? It just seems like throughout, ever since, like, people like Edward Gibbon, Hypatia has just been a bat to beat people. Who's the only reliable source we have? Says she was a virtuous person. She was a good human being. And all the church mourned for her. Probably a Christian. Since, you ever read Paul? Neoplatonism, huh? Stoicism. Epicureanism. I wonder who writes about a lot. Oh, that's Paul of Tarsus, right? The church fathers, they're always quoting Pythagoras. What you used from that heretic Tertullian, pick up anything, any of the works of the church fathers, you'll find them talking about Pythagoras. Plato was considered a saint. Jeez, I mean, I just rendered speechless.